I'm Elaine, 68 years old, and never thought I'd be putting a for sale sign on my daughter Tiffany's house. After working 2 jobs for 30 years, I used my retirement savings to help her buy her dream home. Last month, when I needed a place to stay temporarily, she told me I couldn't live with her because I ruined her aesthetic. Then she handed me cold leftovers in a plastic container as I left. Before I tell you what happened when I sent that photo of the for sale sign, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you've ever had a family member choose image over love, hit that subscribe button. I became a widow when Tiffany was only 4 years old. My husband Carl died suddenly from a heart attack, leaving me alone to raise our daughter. We had some life insurance, but not nearly enough to carry us through to her adulthood. I was a registered nurse, and I immediately picked up extra shifts at the hospital. Eventually, I added weekend work at a nursing home to make ends meet. Those years were a blur of white uniforms, comfortable shoes worn thin, and the constant worry about providing for my little girl. Every penny was accounted for in our household. I clipped coupons religiously, bought clothes at thrift stores, and drove the same reliable Toyota for 15 years. While other nurses took cruises or weekend trips, I put that money away for Tiffany's future. My splurges were small, occasional ice cream treats or a movie night with popcorn when the local theater had discount Tuesdays. Despite our modest lifestyle, Tiffany seemed like a happy child. She was bright and curious, with a natural talent for art and writing. In elementary school, she would create beautiful thank you cards for her teachers and sweet handmade birthday presents for me. "Mommy," she once said, presenting me with a painted rock paperweight, "when I grow up, I want to make beautiful things that make people happy." Those words warmed my heart, and I kept that rock on my desk through all the long night shifts and overtime hours. In high school, Tiffany blossomed academically. She joined the yearbook committee and discovered her interest in design and marketing. I was so proud when she received a partial scholarship to attend the state university. Though I had saved for her education, the scholarship meant we wouldn't need to take out as many loans. She majored in marketing with a minor in digital media, graduating near the top of her class. Looking back, I suppose I can pinpoint when things began to change. During her junior year of college, Tiffany became increasingly conscious of appearances. The sweet girl who once wore mismatched socks because life is too short for boring feet began spending her part-time job money on designer clothes. She dyed her naturally beautiful auburn hair platinum blonde and started wearing makeup that made her look like a different person. When I expressed concern about the expense, she explained it was investing in her personal brand. I didn't fully understand this new world she was entering, but I supported her as I always had. When she talked about influencers and content creation, I nodded and tried to keep up. My generation hadn't grown up with social media or the pressure to curate a perfect online presence. Still, I was proud of her ambition and determination. By the time I approached retirement age at 65, I had managed to save what I thought would be enough for a modest but comfortable future. My plan was to finally travel a bit. Nothing extravagant, just some bus tours to see the Grand Canyon, Niagara Falls, and other American wonders I'd only seen in pictures. I dreamed of volunteering at the local animal shelter, and perhaps taking a pottery class. After decades of caring for others as a nurse, I looked forward to finally having time for myself. Tiffany had been working for a marketing firm for a few years by then. She seemed to be doing well, though she often complained about not advancing quickly enough. She had accumulated thousands of followers on various social media platforms where she posted about fashion, home decor, and what she called lifestyle content. I didn't follow her accounts closely, partly because I found the technology confusing and partly because the daughter I saw online seemed like a stranger sometimes. The filtered photos and carefully worded captions felt nothing like the girl who used to make mud pies in our tiny backyard. The house situation began 3 years ago. Tiffany called me, bubbling with excitement about a perfect house she'd found. It was a charming craftsman-style home in a trendy neighborhood, with original woodwork and large windows. The price was significantly more than I thought she could afford on her marketing salary, but she assured me her career was about to take off, with some sponsored content deals. When she asked if I would help with the down payment, I hesitated. I had been planning to use my retirement fund to purchase a small condo for myself. But Tiffany was persuasive, explaining how property values in that neighborhood were rising rapidly, making it a good investment. She also reminded me that she was my only family, and wouldn't I want to help secure her future? In the end, I not only provided the 20% down payment, but also co-signed the mortgage since her income and credit history weren't sufficient to qualify on her own. Though my name appeared on all the legal documents as a co-owner, we both verbally agreed it was Tiffany's house. I remember the day we signed the papers, her eyes filled with tears as she hugged me. "Mom, I can never thank you enough. This means everything to me." For a while it seemed like a good decision. Tiffany invited me over for dinner occasionally, proudly showing off her decorating progress. She had an undeniable talent for creating beautiful spaces, though I noticed family photos or personal mementos were conspicuously absent from her minimalist aesthetic. When I brought over a quilt my grandmother had made, suggesting it might look nice on the living room sofa, Tiffany gently placed it in a closet, explaining it didn't quite fit the vibe she was creating. I tried not to take it personally. After all, this was her home, and she had the right to decorate it as she pleased. I didn't know then how prophetic that small rejection would become. My housing crisis began quite unexpectedly. The apartment building where I'd lived for the past 12 years was sold to developers who planned to convert the units into luxury condominiums. All tenants received notices giving us 3 months to relocate. At 68, with a fixed income from Social Security and my nurse's pension, finding affordable housing in our increasingly expensive city seemed daunting. I spent weeks scanning rental listings, but everything within my budget was either in unsafe neighborhoods or so far from town that I'd be isolated without a car. My old Toyota had finally given up the ghost the previous year, and I'd been managing with public transportation. The stress began affecting my health. My doctor, concerned about my elevated blood pressure, warned me about the risks of stress at my age. "You've got a minor heart condition, Elaine," she reminded me. "You need to prioritize stability and peace right now." After exhausting all other options, I reluctantly called Tiffany. We spoke weekly, but our conversations had grown increasingly superficial. She would talk about social media metrics and brand partnerships, while I shared simple stories about my volunteer work at the library or the birds visiting my small balcony feeder. I felt nervous asking for help, having prided myself on independence all my life. "Tiffany, honey," I began hesitantly, "I'm in a bit of a situation with my apartment building being sold. I've been looking for a new place, but the market is so difficult right now. I was wondering if I might stay with you temporarily, just until I find something suitable. Maybe a month or 2 at most." The silence on the other end of the line lasted several seconds too long. "Oh," she finally said, her voice tight. "I mean, I guess that would be okay. It's just that I use the house for content creation, you know? My followers expect a certain look, and I have a very specific aesthetic I maintain." Relief mingled with hurt as I assured her I would be respectful of her space and keep my belongings contained. She continued listing conditions. I would need to stay out of the background during her filming sessions, keep the guest room door closed when not in use, and understand that certain areas of the house were styled and shouldn't be disturbed. I agreed to everything, grateful for a solution to my housing crisis despite the less than warm welcome. When I arrived at Tiffany's house 2 weeks later, I was struck anew by how beautiful and impersonal it was. Every surface gleamed, every item seemed intentionally placed. The color palette was entirely neutral whites, beiges, and pale grays dominated each room. There were no books on the shelves, just artfully arranged objects and small plants in matching ceramic pots. It reminded me of a furniture showroom. Lovely to look at but not designed for actual living. Tiffany gave me a quick tour, pointing out the guest bathroom I would use and the areas that were off-limits during content hours. She explained that she now made most of her income as a lifestyle influencer, creating sponsored posts for home decor brands and fashion companies. The house, it seemed, was not just her home but her primary work environment and the foundation of her brand identity. The first criticisms came subtly. As I unpacked my suitcase in the guest room, Tiffany leaned against the doorframe, watching with a small frown as I placed my colorful knitted throw at the foot of the bed. "Mom, would you mind keeping your more colorful items in the closet? When my followers see glimpses of the guest room in my house tour videos, everything needs to be cohesive." I folded the throw, a gift from a patient's family after I helped care for their mother in her final days, and tucked it away in the closet. Of course, dear. I want to be respectful of your space. Over the next few days, the suggestions continued. My floral blouse clashed with the dining room wall color during breakfast. My collection of refrigerator magnets from various states had to be removed because they ruined the clean lines of the kitchen. My comfortable shoes needed to be hidden in the closet rather than left neatly by the door where they disrupted the entryway styling. I tried my best to accommodate Tiffany's requests. I went shopping for new clothes in the neutral colors she preferred, spending money I couldn't really afford on beige cardigans and white blouses. I learned to move silently through the house during her filming sessions, sometimes staying in my room for hours to avoid accidentally walking through the background of a video. I offered to help with cooking or cleaning, but my offers were politely declined. Apparently, my methods weren't aligned with her natural organic cleaning content or her gourmet simplicity aesthetic. Despite these adjustments, I couldn't shake the feeling of being unwelcome in my daughter's home, a home that legally was partially mine. One evening, after Tiffany finished filming a sponsored post for an expensive candle brand, I tried to initiate a heart-to-heart conversation. Honey, I know my staying here wasn't in your plans. I'm doing my best to respect your space and work. Is there anything else I can do to make this arrangement easier for both of us? Tiffany sighed, setting down her phone after checking her latest post's engagement statistics. It's fine, Mom. I just need you to understand that appearances matter in my industry. Everything in my environment affects my brand, and my followers expect consistency. She gestured vaguely toward me. Your generation just doesn't really get how this works. I swallowed my hurt and nodded, wondering when my bright, kind daughter had become this person who seemed to value filtered perfection over genuine connection. As I lay in bed that night, I realized I was walking on eggshells in a house that I had helped purchase, made to feel like an inconvenient guest rather than family. But with my limited options and the tight housing market, I continued my search for a new place while trying to maintain the peace with Tiffany. As weeks turned into a month, then too my housing search proved increasingly frustrating. Rental applications were rejected due to income requirements that my retirement funds couldn't meet. The few affordable senior communities had waiting lists stretching into years. Each evening, I would return to Tiffany's house with the same news. No progress. I could see her patience wearing thin. What began as subtle criticisms evolved into more direct expressions of annoyance. How much longer do you think this will take? She asked one evening, not looking up from her phone as I entered the kitchen. I have a holiday decor partnership coming up, and I need the house to be perfect. I'm trying my best, I said quietly. The market is difficult right now, especially for someone on a fixed income. Tiffany made a non-committal sound and continued scrolling. Well, maybe you should look in the suburbs, or consider a roommate situation with another senior. The suggestion stung. Not because it was impractical, but because of the clear message behind it. My presence was a burden she was eager to eliminate. One afternoon, while Tiffany was out at a networking event with other influencers, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my laptop and searched for her social media accounts. What I found left me speechless. There she was, my daughter, posing throughout the house in carefully staged photos. The captions detailed her design journey and creative vision for each space. In one post, she described the extensive renovations she had supposedly funded herself, claiming she had sacrificed and saved for years to create her dream home. Not once in any post did she mention my financial contribution, the retirement savings that had made the down payment possible, the co-signed mortgage that allowed her to qualify for the loan. In her carefully constructed narrative, she was entirely self-made, a young professional who had achieved the American dream through her own determination and talent. Even more hurtful were the posts where the house was featured prominently in sponsored content. Tiffany was being paid by brands to showcase their products in her home, a home that legally belonged to both of us. While I sat in the guest room trying to make myself invisible, she was profiting from the investment I had made. The restrictions on my movements within the house increased as Tiffany's content creation schedule expanded. A chart appeared on the refrigerator outlining filming hours for different rooms. During these times, I was expected to remain completely silent and out of sight. The kitchen became off-limits during her cooking videos, which seemed to happen almost daily. I found myself eating cold cereal in my room because I couldn't access the stove or refrigerator during normal meal times. One particularly painful incident involved Tiffany's garden content. I had always loved gardening. It was one of the few hobbies I maintained throughout my busy working years. When I noticed some of the plants in her backyard looking neglected, I thought I might make myself useful by doing some weeding and pruning. The next morning, I woke early and spent a peaceful hour tending to the flower beds. When Tiffany discovered what I had done, her reaction was disproportionate to the offense. "Mom, I was planning to film a gardening transformation video tomorrow. Now it's already done, and there's no before footage." Her face flushed with anger. "The brand is paying me to show the process of using their gardening tools. What am I supposed to do now?" I apologized profusely, not understanding how my helpful gesture could have caused such distress. From that day forward, the backyard joined the growing list of spaces where I wasn't welcome. Then came what I now call the leftovers incident. Tiffany had spent an entire day preparing an elaborate Mediterranean feast, not for us to enjoy together, but for a sponsored content piece featuring an expensive line of cookware. I watched from the doorway as she arranged the food beautifully, took dozens of photos from various angles, and recorded herself taking a single bite of each dish while describing the flavors in enthusiastic detail. When the filming finished, I expected she would call me to join her for dinner. Instead, she began packaging portions of the barely touched food into containers. "That looks delicious," I ventured. "Should I set the table for us?" Tiffany looked up, seeming almost surprised to remember I was there. "Oh, I already ate what I wanted for the video. I'm not really hungry now." She handed me a plastic container with a portion of cold paella. "You can have this if you want. I need to clean up now so I can edit tonight." I accepted the container silently, retreating to my room to eat alone. Later that evening, I heard the garbage disposal running. Curious, I went to the kitchen after Tiffany had gone to bed and peeked into the trash can. There was enough discarded food to feed us both for days. Perfectly good meals thrown away after they had served their purpose as props. The final category of humiliation came when Tiffany's friends and professional connections visited the house. The first time it happened, I was sitting in the living room reading when the doorbell rang. Tiffany rushed to answer it, then stopped and turned to me with a panicked expression. "Mom, could you go to your room? Stephanie from Home Haven magazine is here to discuss a feature." I gathered my book and reading glasses, hurrying toward the hallway as Tiffany opened the door with a perfectly practiced smile. As I passed, I heard her introducing me vaguely as someone staying with me for a while. Not my mother, or even a family member. This pattern repeated whenever anyone visited. I was either asked to remain out of sight or introduced in the most ambiguous terms possible. Once, I overheard Tiffany apologizing to a fellow influencer about my presence. "It's just temporary," she assured the woman. "A family obligation thing. You know how it is." Family obligation. As if providing shelter to the mother who had sacrificed everything for her was an unwelcome burden, rather than the most basic expression of gratitude and love. Each night, as I lay in the uncomfortable guest bed, I wondered how we had arrived at this point. How had my sweet little girl, who once made me dandelion bouquets and homemade cards, transformed into someone who saw me as an inconvenience to be minimized, an aesthetic disruption to be managed? The question kept me awake long into the night, as did the growing realization that I might have enabled this transformation through my own unquestioning sacrifice. The situation reached its breaking point in early spring, about 3 months into my stay. Tiffany received news that Home Haven magazine wanted to feature her house in their Young Innovators issue, showcasing up-and-coming design influencers. This was apparently a significant opportunity that could elevate her status in the lifestyle content world. The days leading up to the photo shoot were filled with frantic preparation. Additional decorative items appeared daily: new throw pillows, artisanal vases, fresh flowers delivered each morning. Tiffany hired professional cleaners to go over every inch of the house, then followed behind them, adjusting items by millimeters. Her stress level was palpable, and I did my best to stay completely out of the way. The evening before the scheduled shoot, I made what I thought was a helpful suggestion. Noticing Tiffany arranging flowers in the dining room, I offered some advice from my years of amateur flower arranging. Honey, if you put the taller stems toward the back and add a bit more greenery at the base, it might look more balanced. Tiffany's hands froze mid-arrangement. She didn't turn around, but I could see tension gathering in her shoulders. Mom, she said, her voice tight. I think I know what I'm doing. This is literally my profession. Of course, I said quickly, backing away. It looks beautiful already. Just a thought. That's the problem, she said, finally turning to face me. You always have just a thought or just a suggestion. But you don't understand what I'm trying to achieve here. This feature could change everything for my career. I nodded, apologizing again and retreating to my room. Later that evening, I heard Tiffany on the phone with someone, her voice carrying through the thin walls. It's been a nightmare having her here, she was saying. She touches things, moves stuff around, and has all these opinions about how things should look. Her style is so outdated. No, I've tried explaining, but she doesn't get it. She thinks beige is boring and keeps suggesting I add pops of color. She laughed, but there was no warmth in it. I know, right? Like we're living in 2005. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands trembling slightly as I listened to my daughter mock me to her friend. The pain was sharp and immediate, like a physical blow. The next morning, the day of the photo shoot, I woke early and made myself scarce. I had planned to spend the entire day at the library to avoid being in the way. Before leaving, I quietly prepared a small breakfast for Tiffany, nothing fancy. Just some fresh fruit, yogurt, and granola arranged neatly in a bowl with a cup of her favorite green tea. I left it on the counter with a note wishing her good luck with the shoot. When I returned that evening, the house was quiet. The photo shoot had apparently finished, but there was no sign of Tiffany. I noticed my breakfast offering still sitting on the counter, untouched, my note crumpled beside it. I disposed of the now spoiled food and went to my room, feeling deflated but not surprised. Around 8 o'clock, I heard Tiffany return. She was talking loudly on the phone, sounding elated. The shoot had gone well, it seemed. I came out to congratulate her, but stopped short in the hallway when I heard my name. The photographer said it was one of the most photogenic homes he'd seen for the feature, she was saying. Thank God my mother stayed away today. She literally ruins the aesthetic I've worked so hard to create. I must have made some small sound because Tiffany turned and saw me standing there. For a brief moment, something like shame flickered across her face. Then she quickly ended her call and composed her features into a neutral expression. How did the photo shoot go? I asked quietly. Fine, she said, setting her phone down. It went fine. We stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment before she spoke again, her voice firm and decided. Mom, we need to talk about your living situation. My heart sank, but I nodded and followed her to the kitchen island. She perched on a stool, not offering me a seat. This isn't working, she said bluntly. I've tried to be accommodating, but my home is also my workplace, my brand, and my future. Having someone else here, especially someone with such different tastes and habits, is making it impossible for me to maintain the aesthetic consistency my followers expect. I understand it's been an adjustment, I began, but she cut me off. No, I don't think you do understand. Every time you rearrange something or add your personal touch, you're potentially costing me income. My content engagement drops when things look inconsistent. Brands are paying for a specific look, a specific lifestyle presentation. Tiffany, I'm your mother, I said softly. Surely our relationship matters more than perfect photos for strangers on the internet. Her expression hardened. That's exactly the problem. You don't respect what I do. These strangers on the internet are my audience, my customers, my career. This isn't a hobby. It's how I make my living. I do respect your work, I insisted. I've been trying my best to adapt to your needs. But it's not enough, she said. I need my space back. My brand is everything to me, and I can't risk compromising it any longer. She took a deep breath. I think you need to find another arrangement by the end of the week. The words hung in the air between us. I felt lightheaded suddenly, the kitchen seeming to tilt slightly. The end of the week? But Tiffany, you know I haven't found anything yet. The waiting lists are months long, and my applications keep getting rejected. "That's not really my problem," she said, though she had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Maybe you could stay with a friend temporarily. Or look into those senior living apartments in Springfield. They're more affordable." "Springfield is 2 hours away," I said, my voice barely audible. I'd be leaving behind my doctors, my volunteer work, everything familiar. Tiffany shrugged. "Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for practical reasons." The irony of my daughter, who had benefited from my lifelong sacrifices, lecturing me about sacrifice was not lost on me. I felt something shift inside, a lifetime of accommodation and understanding hardening into something else entirely. Before I could respond, Tiffany stood up. "I have some editing to do tonight. We can talk more about logistics tomorrow." She paused, then reached into the refrigerator and pulled out a container, handing it to me. "There's some leftover ratatouille from today's shoot if you're hungry." I looked down at the container of food. Food prepared not for nourishment or sharing but for photographs. Food offered to me as an afterthought, just like I had become an afterthought in my daughter's carefully curated life. That night, as I packed my few belongings with shaking hands, I found myself crying for the first time in years. Not just for my immediate housing crisis, but for the daughter I seemed to have lost to a world that valued appearance over substance, curated perfection over messy reality, and followers over family. The next morning I called my old friend Barbara. We had worked together at the hospital for 20 years before her retirement, and though we didn't see each other as often now, she had always been someone I could count on. When I explained my situation, trying unsuccessfully to keep my voice steady, she didn't hesitate. "Elaine, you come stay with me right now. I have a spare room, and I've been rattling around this house by myself too long anyway." 2 hours later, I was settled into Barbara's cozy guest room. Unlike Tiffany's sterile, photo-ready space, this room showed signs of real life: books stacked on the nightstand, a slightly worn quilt on the bed, family photos on the dresser. Barbara fussed over me, making tea and expressing outrage at my daughter's behavior. "After everything you did for that girl," she said, shaking her head. "I remember how you used to bring those awful vending machine sandwiches for lunch, so you could save money for her dance lessons." Despite Barbara's warm welcome, I couldn't shake the feeling of humiliation. At 68 years old, I was essentially homeless, rejected by my only child because I didn't fit her aesthetic. The stress of the situation manifested physically. I developed insomnia, had little appetite, and found myself experiencing heart palpitations that concerned me enough to schedule an appointment with my cardiologist. A few days into my stay, Barbara's daughter Melissa came to visit. Unlike Tiffany, Melissa had pursued a practical career as an accountant and had a refreshingly down-to-earth attitude. When she heard about my situation, her accountant's mind immediately went to the financial aspects. "Wait, you provided the down payment and co-signed the mortgage? So your name is on the deed?" she asked. "Yes," I confirmed. "We agreed it was Tiffany's house, but legally, I suppose I'm a co-owner." Melissa frowned. "Do you have copies of the paperwork? I'd like to take a look if you don't mind." I did have copies stored in a folder I'd brought with me. Melissa reviewed them carefully, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Elaine, according to this, you're not just a co-owner. You're the primary owner. Your name is listed first on all the documents." Barbara peered over her daughter's shoulder. "And look here, the property tax statements are addressed to you, not Tiffany." A quick check of my bank statements confirmed what I had forgotten. The annual property tax payments were still being automatically deducted from my account. Further investigation revealed that the mortgage insurance and some utility bills were also linked to my finances. "She told me she was handling all the house expenses," I said, bewildered. "I gave her the down payment as a gift, but I thought she was responsible for everything else." Melissa shook her head. "Based on these documents, you've been paying a significant portion of the ongoing costs. Have you been getting any rent from her?" "No," I admitted. "We never discussed rent. It was her house. Or so I thought." The financial revelations were shocking, but even more disturbing discoveries awaited when Melissa helped me conduct a deeper exploration of Tiffany's online presence. As someone familiar with social media but not emotionally involved, she could navigate the various platforms with detachment. Your daughter has over 200,000 followers across her accounts, Melissa informed me, scrolling through pages of perfectly staged photos. Based on industry standards, she's likely making a substantial income from sponsored content. Indeed, Tiffany's posts frequently featured products with tags like #ad or #sponsored. There were partnerships with furniture brands, cookware companies, fashion labels, and organic food delivery services. In many of these posts, the house I had helped purchase and was still helping to maintain served as the backdrop. She claimed she couldn't afford to help me find a new place, I said quietly, watching as Melissa scrolled past photos of Tiffany posing with luxury items, designer handbags, expensive jewelry, a new laptop she described as an essential investment in my brand. According to these posts, she took a vacation to Bali last year, Barbara pointed out. That's not something someone does when they're struggling financially. The next day, Barbara invited a few of our other former colleagues for lunch. Virginia, Sylvia, and Dolores had all known me during my working years and had watched Tiffany grow up. I was hesitant to share my troubles, but Barbara insisted that supportive friends were exactly what I needed. As we sat around Barbara's dining table, I recounted the past few months. The housing crisis, Tiffany's increasingly cold behavior, the aesthetic comment, and finally being handed leftovers as I was asked to leave. The women listened with expressions ranging from shock to outrage. You bought her that house, Virginia said firmly. Your name is on the deed. She can't just throw you out. She's your daughter, Sylvia added. Family takes care of family. My son moved back in with me after his divorce. Was it ideal? No. But that's what we do for each other. Dolores, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. My nephew is a real estate attorney. I think you should talk to him, Elaine, just to understand your options. The conversation with my friends helped me feel less alone, but it also forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about my relationship with Tiffany. Had I enabled her self-centered behavior by always putting her needs before my own? Had my sacrifices taught her that my purpose was to serve her ambitions rather than to be respected as an individual with my own needs and dignity? These questions followed me to my first therapy session the following week. Something Barbara had gently suggested might help me process the situation. Dr. Chun, a compassionate woman about my age, listened carefully as I shared my story. What you're describing sounds like a pattern of enabling that has evolved over many years, she observed. Your intentions were loving. You wanted to give your daughter every advantage. But somewhere along the way, the balance shifted from healthy support to unhealthy sacrifice. I just wanted her to have the opportunities one never had, I said, tears welling in my eyes. That's natural, Dr. Chun assured me. But part of parenting is also teaching children gratitude, responsibility, and reciprocity. From what you've described, Tiffany has come to view your support as an entitlement rather than a gift. As painful as it was to acknowledge, I knew Dr. Chun was right. In my desire to give Tiffany everything, I had failed to teach her one of life's most important lessons. That relationships must be built on mutual respect and care, not one-sided sacrifice. That night, lying in Barbara's guest room, I made a decision. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I would prioritize my own well-being and dignity. I would stop enabling Tiffany's disrespect, and I would take steps to secure my financial future. A future that had been compromised when I invested my retirement savings in a house that had become a shrine to my daughter's aesthetic, rather than a home where I was welcome. My first step was consulting with Dolores's nephew Michael, who specialized in property law. He reviewed my documents carefully in his downtown office, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. When he finished, he looked up with a decisive nod. Mrs. Carter, legally speaking, the situation is quite clear. You are the primary owner of the property. Your daughter is a co-owner, but your name appears first on all documentation, and you provided the down payment. Furthermore, you've been paying the property taxes and certain other expenses without receiving any rental income or occupancy benefits. What does that mean in practical terms? I asked. It means you have several options, he explained. You could assert your right to live in the property, demand rental payment from your daughter, or even initiate a sale of the house and reclaim your investment. The idea of forcing Tiffany out of her home, even after how she had treated me, felt wrong. I don't want to make her homeless, I said. I just need to protect my retirement and find a stable living situation for myself. Michael nodded understandingly. There are less confrontational approaches we could take. Perhaps a formal rental agreement with your daughter, ensuring you receive fair compensation for your investment, or a buyout arrangement where she purchases your share of the property. I left his office with a clearer understanding of my legal position and several options to consider. My next appointment was with Sarah, a financial advisor Barbara had recommended. The news there was less encouraging. Ms. Gardner, based on your current financial situation, I'm concerned about your long-term security, Sarah said, looking up from my financial statements. A significant portion of your retirement savings went into the house with your daughter. Without income from that investment or a plan to recoup those funds, you may face financial difficulties within the next 5 to 7 years. The reality hit me hard. In trying to help Tiffany achieve her dreams, I had potentially compromised my own ability to support myself through my remaining years. The thought of becoming truly dependent, perhaps eventually needing Tiffany's support, filled me with dread, especially given her recent demonstration of how she valued my presence. What would you recommend? I asked. You need to either generate income from your investment in that property or recover the capital, so you can reinvest it in a way that provides for your needs, Sarah advised. Your pension and Social Security provide a basic foundation, but without additional resources, you'll have limited options for housing and may struggle to cover healthcare costs not covered by Medicare. That evening, I shared what I had learned with Barbara. We sat at her kitchen table, cups of tea growing cold as we discussed my situation. You've spent your whole life taking care of others, your patients, your daughter, Barbara said firmly. It's time to take care of yourself, Elaine. But how do I approach Tiffany? I worried. She'll be furious if I assert my ownership rights. Barbara looked thoughtful. Sometimes people don't appreciate what they have until they face losing it. Maybe Tiffany needs a wake-up call about the reality of your contribution to her picture-perfect life. The next morning, an idea began to form. I remembered how image-conscious Tiffany was, how carefully she controlled every aspect of her brand. Perhaps the most effective way to get through to her was to speak her language, the language of appearances and public perception. I called Lucy, another former nursing colleague who had gone into real estate after retirement. When I explained what I needed, she immediately understood. I have just the sign, Elaine. Big, professional, impossible to miss. And I'll come take the photos myself. We won't actually list the property yet. This is just to make a point, right? 2 days later, Lucy and I drove to Tiffany's house. We had timed our visit for when Tiffany would be at a sponsored event downtown. Information easily gleaned from her public social media schedule. Lucy brought a large for sale sign with her agency's information prominently displayed. As we pulled up to the curb, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and determination. The house looked exactly as it had when I left, perfectly maintained, with not a flower or shrub out of place. It struck me again how much it resembled a model home rather than a place where real life happened. Lucy efficiently placed the sign in the front yard, positioning it for maximum visibility from the street. Perfect, she said, stepping back to assess her work. Now let's get some good photos for your purpose. She took several professional quality pictures of the house with the sign clearly visible. In one particularly effective shot, the sign stood in sharp contrast to the meticulously maintained facade, a jarring intrusion into the perfect image Tiffany had created. Back at Barbara's house, I selected the most impactful photo and composed a simple text message to Tiffany. Since I ruined the aesthetic, I thought I'd help by removing myself completely from your life. The house will be listed next week, unless we can reach an agreement about my investment. I hesitated before pressing send, wondering if I was being too harsh. Then I remembered the cold container of leftovers, the dismissive way she had introduced me to her friends, and the words that had cut so deeply. You ruined the aesthetic I've worked so hard for. With renewed resolve, I sent the message. The response was immediate and frantic. Within seconds, my phone began ringing, Tiffany calling. I let it go to voicemail. Then came a barrage of text messages. What are you doing? Are you insane? Take that sign down right now. You can't sell my house. My followers are already messaging me about this. I turned my phone to silent and waited, knowing Tiffany would eventually realize that digital communication wasn't going to resolve this situation. Sure enough, about an hour later, Barbara's doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Tiffany stood there, face flushed and eyes wild. Mom, what is wrong with you? There's a for sale sign in my yard. My comments section is blowing up with people asking if I'm moving. I stepped aside.
Come in, Tiffany.
I think we need to have a conversation. She stormed past me into Barbara's living room, then stopped short, seeming to register her surroundings for the first time. Is this where you've been staying? In Barbara's guest room. Yes, I said calmly. Barbara was kind enough to take me in when my daughter decided I ruined her aesthetic and gave me leftover food in a plastic container as I left. Tiffany had the grace to look momentarily ashamed before rallying. That's not fair. I explained that I need my space for work. And now you're trying to sell my house out from under me? How could you do this to me? Sit down, I said, gesturing to the sofa. We need to discuss some financial and legal realities. Over the next hour, I calmly explained what I had learned from the lawyer and financial advisor. I showed Tiffany the mortgage documents with my name listed as primary owner, the property tax statements that had been paid from my account, and the utility bills in my name. This isn't just your house, Tiffany. Legally, it's more mine than yours. The down payment came from my retirement savings. I've been paying the property taxes. My name is first on all the documentation. Her face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, anger, calculation, and finally, a kind of desperate bargaining. But we agreed it was my house, she insisted. You gave me the down payment as a gift. Yes, I did, I acknowledged. And I never intended to interfere with your life there. But that was before you treated me like an unwelcome intruder and prioritized your aesthetic over providing shelter to your mother. Tiffany's tone changed, becoming wheedling. Mom, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. I was just stressed about the magazine shoot. You know how important my career is to me. Your career, I repeated. The one where you post photos of the house I helped you buy, claiming you achieved it all on your own? The one where you earn money from brands by showcasing a lifestyle that's partially funded by my retirement savings. She flinched at the directness of my words. What do you want from me? I want what anyone would want, Tiffany. Respect. Appreciation. And since those seem to be in short supply, I also need financial security for my remaining years. We talked for another hour, moving from Barbara's living room to her kitchen table, where I presented the options Michael had outlined. Tiffany could either buy out my share of the house, begin paying me fair market rent for my portion of ownership, or we could sell the property and divide the proceeds according to our contributions. Throughout the conversation, Tiffany cycled through various tactics, pleading, arguing, attempting to make me feel guilty, even briefly threatening legal action, which quickly evaporated when I showed her my consultation notes from Michael. Eventually, as the reality of her situation sank in, she became more subdued. I can't afford to buy you out right now, she admitted. And if we sell, where would I live? This house is central to my brand. Those are valid concerns, I acknowledged. Perhaps we can work out a payment plan or rental arrangement that addresses both our needs. By the time Tiffany left that evening, we had reached a tentative agreement to discuss further with Michael. As she walked to her car, she turned back with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Something close to the genuine look of my daughter before filters and branding had come between us. Mom, she said hesitantly, for what it's worth, I am sorry about how I treated you. I got so caught up in everything. I nodded, not quite ready to offer absolution but acknowledging her apology. We'll talk more soon. The sign comes down when we have a formal agreement. As I watched her drive away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness for what our relationship had become, but also a newfound sense of strength and self-respect that had been missing for too long. The weeks following the for sale sign incident, as Barbara came to call it, were filled with negotiations, legal consultations, and difficult conversations. Michael helped Tiffany and me draft a formal agreement that would protect my financial investment while allowing her to remain in the house. The final arrangement included monthly payments to me. equivalent to fair market rent for my share of ownership, with a portion applied toward eventually transferring full ownership to her. More importantly, the experience prompted honest conversations about our relationship and how it had evolved over the years. During one particularly emotional meeting at a neutral coffee shop, Tiffany finally dropped her carefully maintained facade. "I think I've been trying so hard to create this perfect image that I lost sight of what really matters," she admitted, turning her coffee cup in her hands. "When I started getting attention online, it felt like validation. People admired my taste, my style, my life, even though much of it was carefully staged. The irony is that none of it would have been possible without your very unstaged, imperfect mother," I pointed out, though without bitterness. Tiffany nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "I know. And I never acknowledged that publicly because it didn't fit the self-made image I was creating. I'm ashamed of that now." With the legal and financial aspects addressed, I turned my attention to securing my own future. Using the rental income from Tiffany and some careful budgeting, I was able to make a down payment on a small, cozy condo in a 55-plus community about 20 minutes from the city. It wasn't the retirement I had originally envisioned, but as I furnished it with colorful pillows, family photos, and the knitted throws that had been deemed unsuitable for Tiffany's aesthetic, it became something perhaps even better, a true reflection of myself and my values. My new home became a place of healing and rediscovery. I planted flower boxes on my small patio, joined the community garden club, and enrolled in the pottery class I had long dreamed about. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones among my neighbors, people who valued experience over image, substance over style. As for Tiffany, the for sale sign incident seemed to trigger some genuine reflection. In the months that followed, subtle changes appeared in her online presence. While she still created beautiful content, there were glimpses of more authentic moments. A slightly messy kitchen during a real cooking attempt, an occasional post about family history, even a carefully worded acknowledgement of her mother's contribution to her journey. Our reconciliation didn't happen overnight. We began with tentative Sunday dinners at my new condo. No phones allowed, no photographs taken. The first few meetings were awkward. Our conversation stilted as we navigated this new, more honest relationship. Gradually, though, moments of genuine connection emerged. Tiffany offered to help plant my summer garden. I asked questions about her work that came from curiosity rather than judgment. 6 months after the for sale sign appeared on her lawn, Tiffany surprised me by showing up at my door with a small wrapped package. "What's this?" I asked, inviting her in. "Open it," she said, an uncharacteristic nervousness in her expression. Inside was a framed photograph. Not one of her usual perfectly staged images, but a slightly blurry snapshot from my nursing graduation decades ago. I was holding a toddler Tiffany on my hip, both of us laughing at something off camera. "I found it in an old album," she explained. "I thought maybe you could put it somewhere in your new place." The next day, that photograph took pride of place on my living room wall. A reminder of the authentic connection that had once existed between us and might, with work and honesty, exist again. The journey hasn't been perfect. There are still moments when Tiffany slips into old patterns, when the pull of her online persona overshadows our relationship. There are times when I still feel the sting of past hurts, but we continue to work towards something more genuine than what came before. Looking back now, I recognize that the for sale sign was about much more than reclaiming my financial investment. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my worth beyond what I could provide or contribute to others. It was about learning, even at 68, that love without respect is not really love at all. In my small, colorful condo, so different from Tiffany's neutral-tone showplace, I found a peace I didn't know was possible. I've learned that authenticity may not photograph as well as carefully curated perfection, but it nourishes the soul in ways that no aesthetic ever could. If my experience has taught me anything, it's that true value lies not in how something looks but in how it feels. The comfort of a hand-knitted throw that tells a story, the slight imperfections in handmade pottery, the genuine laughter in an out-of-focus photograph. These are the elements of a life well lived. A life too rich and complex to be filtered into blandness for the approval of strangers. So if you find yourself measuring your worth by others' standards, crafting a life to please an audience rather than to satisfy your soul, or sacrificing authentic connections for aesthetic perfection. I hope my story serves as a gentle reminder. The most beautiful lives are rarely the most photogenic. They're the ones filled with color and complexity, with mistakes and growth, with relationships that value the person over the presentation. Before I go, I'd love to know if you've ever had to stand up for yourself with family members who took you for granted. Have you ever had to put a metaphorical for sale sign on something important to get someone's attention? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button so we can continue sharing these life lessons together. Remember, it's never too late to choose authenticity over aesthetics, and self-respect is always in style. Thank you for listening to my story, and may your own life be rich with genuine connections that value you for exactly who you are.